1994 Ford Crown Vic with a 4.6. Going to replace the intake gasket. Also going to do the plug wires and spark plugs. First you want to do is pull the spark plug boots out, mark the number they're in, you know, like 1 through 4 on this side, 1 through 4 on that side, and mark them on the coils clockwise. This one's got wires clockwise, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not going by cylinders because it's too confusing. Because Ford is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So everything's gonna be back and forth. So I just do it like that. Pull the plug wires out. Disconnect your fuel lines. Gotta use the red one for the small one, the green one for the bigger one. You know, push them, put them on here like so. They go like that, and what it does is it pushes on the spring that's inside there, opens the spring up so that it gets over the little lip on here. And if they don't want to turn, get your pliers on there and turn them, because they got to be able to twist. Okay? So, you got them loose. Get your wires out, and then I'm going to undo the wires from the coils. And I'm going to do to take out the whole assembly. There's a nut here, and there's a nut down here for the plastic retainer. And get the wires out of the way. And I'll work on my throttle cables. Undo them from the linkage. Just a ball stud on that one. And then I'll remove this one, 8mm, and there's another 8mm, and get these out of the way. And then I think I want to take out my fuel rail. Forgot to tell you, disconnect your battery, your negative, because you are going to be disconnecting computer wires, and you don't want to get a voltage spike or something like that and short out the computer. So I got the throttle cables out. There were 2 8s, one on each. There's a screw. I unplugged my injectors. Okay. Took my upper radiator hose off. Reason why I'm doing the intake gasket, because it's leaking coolant right here. And it fills up the top of the head with coolant and goes down inside the spark plug boot holes. And then shorts out the spark plugs. So that's why I'm doing it. Okay, and I have to get this. I got all the 8s out of the wire harness. I need to lift the harness up, kind of up out of the way, so I can get this intake out. And most likely I'm going to take the starter off. So take the belt off, take the starter off. When I get the starter off, that'll help get that intake out of there. And take off your heater hoses in the back and your brake booster vacuum line. Okay, I got the belt off, and I used my belt tool. It's a 1/2 inch. Removed the alternator. You had your 2 bolts on the bottom, and you loosen these 2 up on the bracket, and you take this one out. And then you take the alternator power off, 10mm, and you take your 2 harness connectors off. Don't break the connectors. Use a little screwdriver pick to get them off. Okay, I'm going to take the throttle body off because I need to get my fuel line out from underneath it. Well, I had to take this throttle body induction pipe off. There's 4 bolts, 8mm heads. Driver's side, passenger side, swivel, 8mm on the back, and straight long extension 1/4 inch. And you got your EGR sensor that plugs in, and your tube. You got these vacuum lines and a connector. You can get to them if you unbolt this. You got a hose here. Bring it up out of the way, you can unplug it. Okay. Reason why I'm having such a hard time is because the EGR valve is in the back. Yeah, it's been about 25 years since I've done one of these. So I have to take the EGR valve off the intake because it's got the tube that goes down to the exhaust manifold. You can't get nothing on it. So I'm going to try taking the two 10mm bolts out. They go in that way. There's two of them. One here and one there below it, you know. So I get to it. I don't know if there's anything else. Forgot to tell you. But yeah, now I can get this out of the way. The fuel rail. So for the fuel rail, I get them out, and I'll spray some brake clean on the injectors where it goes into the intake, and I'll wiggle them back and forth, and I'll pry them up, and they'll come right out. Well, before you take the intake out of there, completely take the throttle cable and bracket off. It hits the wire harness and gets in the way. So it kind of hangs up back in the back of the passenger side head. I'm going to pull it forward a little bit and tilt this side up, passenger side up, and put it on top of the runner right there. And that's what it's resting on. Now we'll just bring it on out like that. Oh, here we are right now. I just picked it up and I brought it up. So now I can push my wire harness gradually back each step. So now we'll tilt it up. See how deep it is? It's pretty deep. You know, gotta get the bottom of it to clear the fan shroud. Okay, I got my surfaces clean. I got my new gaskets. I put a little bit of silicone top and bottom on the ports with the coolant because there's pits on the heads. I got my EGR valve gasket with my bolts started through the EGR valve. So I got my intake sitting here ready to go in, so I'll place it down in there. And then I'll get my EGR bolts started. They go in there. Okay. And EGR bolts, make sure you get them started by hand. Do not cross thread them, okay? Alright. Okay, I got the intake in there. Okay, you gotta stick this corner of the intake down below the head, and otherwise it gets stuck up on it. Then on the other side, there's a bracket. And I didn't see it. The middle bracket on this wire harness, and the intake got stuck on that. So got that out of the way. I line up my holes, and then I started my EGR bolts. So I got them all started. Now I'm going to put my intake bolts in. Start them all, and then I'll snug them up, and then tighten them up, torque them, and then I'll torque my EGR valve bolts. Okay, now that you got your intake torqued, EGR valve torqued, Alternator control plugged in, now you can work on your PCV hose. Replace the hose and a T with the new T, a new hose, piece it in, make a couple dry runs, make sure it fits properly. Put that in, and then put your injectors in. Wipe off your injectors, clean them up, put some grease on the ends and on the ends, put some grease in the porthole, and then you can slide the whole fuel rail assembly in, and tighten those 4 bolts. Injector fuel rail is in and your 4 bolts are on. Tighten them up. Now we're going to work with our intake induction tube. That's what I call it. We try to buy bolts on, and the bottom goes to the intake. Clean that all up. Go back on, make sure you put your EGR sensor on and your evap. Make sure that's plugged in. And plug this one in. And that one in. Okay, I'll get those. These are the little 8mm head bolts. Make sure your EGR valve vacuum line plugs into this side of the induction tube. And another one of it comes around and goes over here to the fuel pressure regulator. And the other one's running around the back and goes below the EGR sensor. And it goes over to the solenoid, comes into the solenoid, and then comes down to the EGR valve. Okay? Don't forget to plug your evap. Well, the EGR solenoid in, back in. Yep, get everything out of the way. Got this tightened up. Okay. I think I'll put my coolant hose on. It's not too soft. Feels okay. Put a different clamp on it. Put my bolts back into my wire harness. Put my spark plugs in. Torque those. And then put my fuel lines back on with some anti-seize on them and some penetrant on the O-rings. Okay, and also my alternator. Just so you know, these are the throttle body bolts and the throttle body intake tube bolts. There's 8 of them. They look like this one. They're longer. And the ones that are shorter and have the bigger washers, those are for the fuel rail. Then they got some like these that are shorter, and that's for the wire harness. Okay. And then also don't forget the throttle cable bracket. Okay. There's your little ones. Okay. Okay, I got my alternator on. Got my 2 long bolts tight. And one on the back and the bracket. The belt's on. Got my spark plugs in. If you're going to do wires now. If you're not going to do wires, then just hold on. But then you'll need to do your wire harness over to your coil on the driver's side. Hook them up and route the wire down below to the power steering and the oil pressure switch and hook those up. I'm going to do plug wires, so, and then I'll finish her up. Okay, I got my wires on, my plug wires. Didn't turn out too bad. Got my fuel lines hooked up, got my throttle cables hooked up, got my oil sending unit hooked up, my power steering switch hooked up, my oil filter on. Make sure you put your oil filter on, don't forget that. Okay, now you can put your air intake and air filter in there, and then you can start it, and then top off your coolant. Check to see how everything else is working. Make sure everything's properly, no check engine light, no misfires. And be all set. And of course, gotta hook up your battery. Okay, good luck. Hope you enjoyed it.